just joined me here at the Mexico 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Reeves from Amazon is with us. Welcome him.
Thank you very much.
And you're not alone. You're the Global Executive Creative Director of Amazon, which is, I think, a challenging thing. Eh?
It's a very challenging thing, but it's a challenge that I've actually enjoyed.
Okay, what is the biggest challenge right now for you?
You know, I think when we look at Amazon as a whole, is the understanding of who we are as a company and where we're going into the future.
Okay, and now we're talking about being brave, the new brand experience, because agencies are working for decades like they did before. And do you think this cannot go on?
When we think about the customer and the consumer, and that's how Amazon is placed, we're a very customer-first company. My question is how are business models changing to reflect the customer and how they've evolved?
And now the thing is that you are now asking the questions to wonderful ladies, Susanna Mori from Sita and Elisa Hedge, Deloitte Digital. Welcome to the Mexico 2017. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very exciting to be here, and this is my first conference in Cologne, so it's great to be here. Just to confirm that Alicia is the CMO of Deloitte Digital, and Suzanne is the Executive Creative Director at Zeta, which is wonderful. I also want to congratulate them. When you look at the global trailblazers by Refinery 2029, these two ladies were written up today and yesterday, so congratulations to them and congratulations to their career and what they've achieved. So thank you very much for everything. When we look at advertising as a whole, I tend to look at the mid-2000s as a big turning point to where we are now. Two remarkable things happened. One was the invention of social and the growing of social itself. The second was the mobile technology, and those two things changing actually changed the consumer rapidly. I've been around for more than I admit, for a long, long time, and what was the beginning of a new era, which was the new aware, more experienced consumer, has actually changed away from the push society. I can remember in the 1990s and early 2000s of creating great television spots which were selling who we are and what we're doing, but the customer now has gone away from that and they're moving into deeper experiences. So if the customer is changing and they're shying away from where they are, the question I have, and I want to put to these women here, is what are we doing as an industry to evolve, and how are we evolving with them? And that's the main point of what I want to talk about. The new society is what I call the pull society. The customer is truly in charge. The best case in point, I believe, was the Caitlyn Jenner Pepsi commercial of a few months ago, when Pepsi ran this commercial, and whether I like it or not is not the question. The question is how the society reacted, and can you imagine in 2000, 2003 such a huge public outcry against one 60-second commercial? And that was a definite showing that the consumer is now in charge. They will run a brand and own a brand. They will guide a brand and help move it forward. So they're seeking more of an experience, and most importantly, today's customer can sniff the smell out a mile away. The customer journey has definitely evolved as well. And the customer can actually own the relationship, but also when you think of branding, the customers can go from awareness to sale in a matter of seconds, where years ago it was days and weeks. And as customer changes, the question I have is how are we as an advertising and marketing business actually changed? Has our model changed? How we make money changed? Why in a lot of CPG companies or big marketing companies, why is sales and marketing so separate? Why in advertising as a whole, the search part of advertising and the branding part of advertising are in separate teams? At the end of the day, the customer is exactly the same. They're one customer. But if they're evolving and they're changing, the question is how do we change? one of the great things about advertising, we like to complain, right? We all like to talk about woes and what we've done and how we're moving, but I think it's time to talk about real change and understand what real business is doing and understanding that the walls have evolved and people have actually moved forward. So what does it take to be brave in today's world, and what does it take to be a company of where we're going? Just over 12 months ago, I actually joined Amazon. And one of the reasons why I actually joined Amazon, I want to be in a place where I can grow and develop as a marketer or as advertising, or even as a creative, as I am. But I also wanted to work in a place where the customer is truly first. And at Amazon, I have no doubt the customer is number one in our books. We really don't look at competition, we look at customers. And our principals also decide that we have to think big, learn and be curious, and actually drive and move forward at every stage. And it's a challenge I put to my teams on a constant basis. I love this quote from Jeff Bezos, and it's a quote that I use a lot for my teams, and it's a quote that we talk about a lot. How do you actually move forward as a company, and how do you actually define where you're going? And embracing trends will actually get you a tailwind rather than moving backwards or staying still. In today's society, and especially what Bob was talking about previously in the previous speech, if you're staying still, compared to the rest of the world, you're actually going backwards. So it's important to move forward. So with that in mind, I want to start opening up questions. I believe the first question is kind of soft, to be honest. Just as a quick side note, apparently Suzanne and Alicia were talking earlier today about wearing black, and for some reason they left me out of the conversation.
Get the memo.
I'm not too sure why, but we'll talk about that off stage afterwards. But anyway, I think I'd like to go to the first question, and I'm going to ask Suzanne the first question. Really, when we talk about bravery and failure, is can they coexist in our world today?
Thanks, Anthony. I think that we're all used to failing and being brave at the same time. It's one of those things that we've learned as an industry. We've learned how to be innovative. We've learned how to be fearless. We've learned how to basically control the message through bravery. A good example of it this year was Fearless Girl. She was a brave, not only action, but became a movement. And I think it resonated a lot with what we do. Failure is something we definitely learn from, and we not only coexist, we learn from it and we grow from it.
Alicia?
You know, it's interesting. In the old model of traditional advertising production, there was really no place for failure in a system that was designed to produce one piece of pristine content. But with digital advertising now, we essentially have the largest focus group in the world at our fingertips. And there may be no better place for testing and learning than advertising. I think the most strategic marketers actually recognize that customer engagement is an absolute hotbed of insight into business model, product, and services innovation. And if you use it right, you can actually make the role of marketing incredibly strategic in a business.
Suzanne, I'm going to redirect back to you for a second here, and you're probably going to hate me for it, but you run a team. How do you help them take big steps and understand that failure can be a tremendous thing at the same time?
I think failure, it can be defined by who you're asking. The clients can see something as a failure, but really it could be a success. So it's the definition, putting the parameters around failure, and then redefining them. Really the only failures that exist are stepping stones for us. There was a campaign that I did recently where we did an animated GIF, and there was fire on it, and it failed miserably. It was the worst performing campaign that we had done in a while. However, the client loved it, and we loved it because it really resonated, and it created some kind of reaction that we all love. So we're trying to leverage it in a smarter way by retargeting the customer and rethinking the way that we used it.
Great. Cool. So let's start getting to the meat of what we're here for today. And Alicia, when you think about what brave businesses are doing differently and how they're actually growing and moving forward, How are you, advising them on what they should do and where they should be?
You know, it takes a lot of bravery to be willing to revisit the ground that you're standing on as a business. And especially if it's the ground you've been winning on as a business. But the truth is that right now, businesses are being overtaken by those who are coming in and playing your game, but with new rules. And so you've got to challenge your most fundamental assumptions on an ongoing basis. And I think the most brave businesses that I see out there doing that are really uncovering new ways to deliver value as a business, which I'm actually very inspired by. I think of Airbnb, who sells both a place to sleep and they sell inclusion, a more inclusive world. I think of Starbucks, who sells coffee, and they also sell community. Think of SoulCycle, who sells exercise and enlightenment.
Right.
It takes bravery to think about your business differently.
What do you see, Suzanne?
I've seen the whole world we live in evolve. It started, we were traditional agencies, and then we were digital and traditional, then we were hybrid, and then we were data powered. I think the next evolution is that businesses really need to stay ahead of the curve, that they need to talk about AI and machine learning, really power the data to target customers and what they want. Unless we're talking to the customers in the way that they expect and they want, which is a really personalized one-to-one experience, then we're really just talking at them.
Alicia, going back to your comment about, I think SoulCycle's a great example and Airbnb is a great example. The inclusionness of Airbnb is fantastic, but when I think about SoulCycle specifically and how they bring that community together, and you use it for Starbucks, how can an average everyday brand, and they think they're an everyday brand, start creating that environment?
I think as marketers, if we look at the types of value that we can create through marketing, through experience, we have to remember that our customers are human beings. And human beings reward humanity. And as connected as we are, we're also more disconnected than ever. Mm-hmm. So really looking at the way you're engaging your customer, your humans, to uncover new ways of delivering that value through marketing. It's not always a cause marketing campaign, but being very authentic and honest about the value you're creating and amplifying that, I think is very powerful for any business.
Excellent. So, we all come to conferences similar to this one, and when you're afterwards, you're in a restaurant or enjoying a cup of coffee or two after the conference, and you all talk about like what we need to do, but then you go back to the real world and you forget about it. And another year comes past, and you come back here again or go to another conference, and you go, I haven't actually moved forward. So, what are some people doing now to take big, brave steps forward, and what questions should they be asking themselves now, today, so they can actually take those steps forward tomorrow? Suzanne?
I think one of the biggest questions is the topic we're talking about, which is how brave are they being? Are they being brave and bold in the way that they treat their customer, their product? Are they tracking everything? Do they know who the brand is? I don't think it used to be, you were talking about the one-off, it used to be about the Super Bowl, it used to be about the big spots. Now it's not about that. It's about retention, it's about loyalty, and the real questions that businesses need to be asking themselves is, are they going to stay ahead of what's next? Because we all know something is coming around the corner, we just don't know what it is yet.
Alicia?
I think everybody should create a day one plan. I think you should look at your business and say, what if today were the very first day? What business would I build? It's really hard to actually challenge the business you're in. And I think by asking yourself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? What would I do if I was approaching this on a blank canvas? You'll be much more honest about what you should be doing. And we know that it's really the customer-centric companies that are winning. No one argues that. But very few companies have actually reoriented fully around the customer. And I think businesses should challenge themselves on that.
I do love what you say about day one, because at Amazon, we do treat every day as day one,
Yeah.
and it's something that's ingrained in you from when you actually start in the company. And if ever been to a place that encourages you to reinvent yourself on a constant cycle and look at yourself on a constant cycle, that's Amazon and who we are and what we do. So thank you for throwing me that bone. I spoke earlier about customer habits and how they're changing. When I'm a bit of a cultural anthropologist, and I believe that as the evolution of digital has far surpassed the evolution of mankind. In fact, I still believe we're exactly as we were 10,000 years ago, but the difference is we're doing it through this amazing technology. We're still very human, we're still very tribal. If you think about your groups and your family and where you believe, like what you believe in and where you live, your tribes now exist on Instagram, or your 400 close friends on Facebook, or in the customer comments section on Amazon. So the customer belief and behavior hasn't really changed, but they're just doing it through that technology. So Alicia, when you're talking about customer behavior and how it's changed, how do you look at it and how do you advise your clients?
So the way to effectively adapt to persistent change is through persistent learning. And what we see too often is that companies will have a giant, shiny tech stack and piles of data, but they're not using it effectively. And in order to create a system for persistent learning, you have to be able to use it effectively. And that requires two things. One, you have to architect your technology around data flows and not just components. And the second is you have to have workflows that actually map to using those data flows. And that requires integration across the organization and the breaking down of silos and the total rethink on how you operate.
So from a creative point, Suzanne, you've been around and you've worked in some great brand agencies and you've seen the customer change a lot. So how should a company be brave now with the eye on the customer?
I love what you said, and I think that having the customer at the core is the most important thing. Having the workflow correct is, equally important. But I think really just understanding that it is the customer at the core, it's the personalization, it's the one-to-one just conversation that they have, that businesses really have with their customers, and that's how they can retain them and create loyalty.
I'm going to throw a different question out there, which is, I read this terrific quote on LinkedIn the other day, which was, innovation should not be a department. And it should run through the whole company or organization. I'll start with you, Suzanne. What's your thought on innovation?
I think innovation is so important. I believe strongly, and I have my team do it all the time. We can't just deliver what we're expected. We need to innovate. We need to bring new ideas. Sometimes the innovations become something like Fearless Girl or become other big campaigns that really resonate and become a movement. If we don't innovate, we are not moving forward. We are going backwards. So unless we really think about what's next and plan for what's next and keep the innovation going, we're just going to be a step behind.
Alicia, do you think innovation should be a standalone or it should be thread throughout a company?
I think creativity is another word for innovation. Mm-hmm. And we see creativity as the most important business skill of the 21st century.
One of the questions I get a lot, and from a creative point of view, because I understand I'm a creative at heart, is we want to take risks, we want to be brave, we want to step out, but everyone's worried about the bottom line and the bottom dollar and how it's going to affect my business in the future. So Alicia, how do you not regret taking big, brave steps today?
You think bold, you think big, and you test small. So unless you put a system for persistent learning into place, you can make missteps and not notice. So you decide, and then watch, and then you learn. And we talk about failure and the difference between failure that's a waste of time and failure that delivers value is learning. Do you have systematic learning actually in place? Or are you just hoping that you notice along the way when something may be off course? Take quite seriously the need to develop persistent learning as a core capability of running a business.
Suzanne?
I think that being brave without regretting is building and growing in a smart way. So it's having the right equipment, having the right people, setting yourself up for success in the way that a lot of companies could learn from. So it's building smart and building small and then growing up from there.
Nice. So I think we're coming to the end of the session, and I want to make sure that everyone has a nice little takeaway towards the end. When I present, I talk about can-dos. What can you do today to help you to learn and grow from tomorrow? And I'll start with Alicia. And when you think about three things or three simple statements someone can do now, what would they be, and how can people take them away to learn and to grow?
You can be brave without being stupid. And persistent learning is the key. And bravery is what will separate the innovators of the future from the businesses in the history books.
Suzanne?
You got a plus. I think that one of the things that we do is we try to be a lot of things to a lot of people. The one thing that I've learned is you can't be a jack of all trades and be a master of one thing really well. So it's just knowing your trade well and really delivering on it.
And I think from my point of view and from Amazon's point of view, I'll go back to, I think it was the third slide we spoke about, where change is happening, and if you're not leaning in and embracing that change now, you're definitely going to get a tailwind into the future. And I think that the quote from Jeff is quite real and quite tangible now when you think about what's happening in front of us. If you're a company that hasn't leaned into AI or voice or even VR now, you really, really have a bit of a tailwind. It's time to lean in, time to get ahead of it. If there's one thing I want you guys to walk away with now is voice is coming. It's the most human, tribalistic way of communication that we actually have. When you think about the tribes, 10,000 years ago, a simple grunt or a gesture was really, really all they had, and so voice is a very natural thing. If you ever played with a device that has AI into it or voice into it, you'll really know that. So if there's one thing now, leaning into voice would be the most biggest thing I would want you to walk away with. So as we finish up here, I do want to put a big thank you out towards the Andy Awards. They really helped pull this together, and their relationship with the conference was terrific. Also want to thank Alicia and Suzanne for joining me here. Again, congratulations on being a powerful trailblazer. I think it's tremendous, and for making a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.